When you look at Led Zeppelin I, you've got an album. First of all, engineered by Glenn Johns, right? Page playing equipment that he doesn't normally play, definitely on stage, and certainly not on some later albums. As he progressed, he played through, I think, a 10 watt amp first of all, and a psychedelically painted Telecaster that was given to him by Jeff Beck. And that's part of the sound. It was recorded in 36 hours. All right. Jimmy Page had a lot to do with it. He had to finance it. If you look into it, actually, their manager, Peter Grant, also helped finance it. So he owns the product, him and Peter Grant. And so when they go out and they shop this thing, the band pretty much gets everything they want in a deal from Atlantic Records. And the deal they got, and the kind of man that Matt Ertegun was, who was controller of Atlantic Records, he was a man of his word and everything. That's why Led Zeppelin got together, surviving members, with Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, and did the famous 2007 memorial concert for Ahmet. And thank God they did, because at least we have that on DVD. If you couldn't have been there, that's the next best thing. One of my favorite DVDs ever. They were hot. They showed up to play. Highlights for the album is Good Times, Bad Times, Dazed and Confused, Communication Breakdown. And when I say those three, I just kept it to three when covering these albums, right? You've got something that transcends beyond what was generally being received and made by musicians at the time. This was new, right? And the critics did not like this album, did not like this band. England didn't like this band even more than the United States. And if not for the United States fans, who just gravitated toward them for some strange reason, and word of mouth, this album is now seen, an album that was made by today's money for about $30,000. Now we get to Led Zeppelin II. All right, again, Led Zeppelin II was recorded everywhere, all over the world, on other planets, in other galaxies, right? While the band was on the run. It was eventually mixed down by Jimmy Page and Eddie Kramer, who would start working with them quite a bit as an engineer. He was credited as being the engineer. But once again, the album was not well received by critics. Okay? As a matter of fact, here is a sample from Rolling Stone. I was looking at my notes. It just said this. John Mendelsohn wrote a negative review of the record for Rolling Stone, in which he mocked the group's heavy sound and white blues, while writing that, quote, "Until you've listened to the album 800 times, as I have, it seems as if it's just one heavy song extended over the space of two whole sides." His name is John Mendelsohn, but we know who he was getting his marching orders from, right? Now, I've got these three albums. As a matter of fact, I got their catalog plus a couple of bootleg albums. I think I've got a couple of bootleg albums. I have a live album from them. But this album, we've already discussed tonight. Which is the best way for this? We've already discussed tonight, and of course, this is what many people call Led Zeppelin I. It's just Led Zeppelin, right? I got this copy from one of Peebethal's auctions, right? And it's an early release and very clean. I love it. Now, this one is Led Zeppelin II. We've already discussed this tonight a bit already. Again, throwing everything but the kitchen sink in to the recording compared to their first album, and yet the critics, you heard exactly what they had to say. Now, for me, this album, I found this is the second Led Zeppelin album that I bought. Most of these are German pressings, right? And this is the one that you get the alternative version mix as well. And then, of course, I picked this up, and I'm not sure if this one's German or not. I was looking at it earlier, and the studio lighting wasn't going to let me see that. But all of these are like 180 grams, except for, of course, what you would call, or many would call, Led Zeppelin I, which is an older pressing, early pressing. I don't think it's a first pressing, but an early pressing. Patrick's got good ears, and I trusted him on it. And when I got it, it sounded absolutely amazing. Then we get to Presence. And this is, like I said, 5 albums later. And this is an album for the first time, really heavily, where there was a lot of problems during the recording of this. First of all, Jimmy wanted this album out, and he wanted this sound. He wanted to get back to, let's just be a band. Nobody sits down at keyboards for the most part. Let's get right to it. Let's show them. And he pushed Robert Plant to both for writing and recording. You got to remember, Robert Plant at this point had just been in a horrible car accident, and he was still in a wheelchair when he was recording some of these vocals. So it wasn't a real pleasant experience for all who were concerned, and he wasn't the only one going through problems at this point in the band. So at the very least, it was a pressure record to make. I'll tell you, when that album came out, I was kind of tired of the old, 50s reflective thing that was happening. You saw it on TV, Happy Days and all of that. I was, that stuff was just so impasse, and the album cover seemed like that. I look back on it now, and it's a great album cover when you look at it, the whole thing, the whole presentation, the presence of the object. I've even got a cheap imitation of the object right here in the studio. It's in all my videos, isn't it? Right there. Okay. This ought to tell you how much of a fan I am of this album, right? And it also starts off with one of Led Zeppelin's very best songs, and in the top 10 of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs, and it's a long song. Okay, so this isn't something that you just kind of go, that first cut was pretty good, but and then you assess the rest of the album. And the second cut is damn near as good when you listen to this album. And you know what? Candy Store Rock. I've been listening to this album a whole lot. I'm starting to become a fan of Candy Store Rock. So this was a happy time for me, though. I loved this record, and I was tracking, and it was successful. I mean, it sold, but it wasn't selling up the place, right? And so when people compare these two albums, you've got, people usually say, well, on Led Zeppelin I, the songs are, and the approach is almost as good, but you have a hesitant Robert Plant trying to still cement his voice. His vocals are great, but he's not sure where he's at. Why am I here? He's not a lyricist. He's, why am I here? How am I going to fit into this pocket? Years later, he said, that was my whole thing, is how to ride this beast, how to provide melody. That was one thing he saw that he needed to do, especially in the first album, because he wasn't supplying lyrics at that point. But he says that's probably the biggest thing that he gave to it. Led Zeppelin II, Robert's writing totally comes to the fore. He's now grooved. They have that, like the poll says, it is the perfection of what came first in many ways. And yet I find myself, despite the fact that you've got, I said the highlights for one, how about highlights of Whole Lot of Love, Ramble On, and Heartbreaker? But when you say that and you look at Presence, how about Achilles' freaking Last Stand? Nobody's Fault But Mine, For Your Life. The whole album seemed to not get a whole lot of love to begin with, right from the get-go. And I remember the time. I remember where I live. I remember when it came out, and I was thinking to myself, my God, why isn't everybody just gobbling up this album? Friends of mine from high school that were buying Led Zeppelin albums weren't buying this album. For the first time, Led Zeppelin ran into a bit of a snag as far as sales. Again, it sold very well, but it wasn't selling the blockbuster of the last three previous albums for sure. You know, I was listening to Led Zeppelin II all day today. And I've got to say, if I ranked these three albums, and this is a good point to where I finally do that. You guys say that Led Zeppelin II is number one, and Led Zeppelin I is number two, and Presence in third place. I would put, to tell you the truth, you know, when I look at the bear and everything, I would put Led Zeppelin I in third place. When I'm thinking about what I would just like to just jam on and listen to, and all of these albums are high. I think all three of them are in my top 4 out of 8 and 9 if you include Coda. So these are highly placed albums. And then I would put Presence at number 2. I would agree with the tribe in general on the poll that Led Zeppelin II is the masterpiece between the three. They're all three masterpieces as far as I'm concerned. But it has the slight edge. I have been shouting from the rooftop that Presence is, at the very least, Led Zeppelin's most underrated album. As a matter of fact, where was that? I had that note where they were talking about, yeah, here it is. This is a copy from Wikipedia, right? It said it received mixed reviews. We're talking about Presence from critics and is the lowest selling album by the band, but has received more positive reviews in the years since its release. And on top of that, I said that I'm starting to like Candy Store Rock. I've started digging into it because, see, this is the one time where you're just hearing, I'll tell you, you say you like Bonzo, then you gotta like this album. Because Bonzo's best drumming is on this album. As far as track 1 to track end, he does his best overall album performance on Presence. Nowhere else does he do quite the height of performance. That doesn't mean there isn't a song on 2 that doesn't cook every song on Presence. It's just that Presence is John Bonham operating on this level and never, ever fading from that level, and other drummers are down here.